I want to start with how we as individuals make perceptions. In the short time I have available, I'll try to give you a bird's eye view of what are the key themes that through my decades of experience, by direct application, I have learned are really, really key as we begin to approach corporate wellness, which cannot be had without an inner transformation. So I'm only bringing in the frameworks and models that I have myself either been, I've been certified in, I have actually applied it, or have helped evolve them. And I hope that that'll give you a spectrum of possibilities. So the first and foremost is there's no one reality as perceived by us. All of us perceive based on our own background, our own vasanas and samskaras, and what data we select from, what is happening around us, and what kind of stories we build up. So the first and foremost thing to do is just recognize that what we think is, this is a fact, if we can just hold it lightly, because different people will have various perceptions, and also recognize our actions are ultimately what lead to performance in an organization. So even if you approach this from a perspective of how can I improve corporate performance, unless you bring us this kind of a perspective, it's very difficult. A very dear friend of mine who's been in the yoga space for over 40 years, very beautifully said very recently to me that a true yogi, a sthit prajna who is established in yoga, is one who can be in flow for 3 hours, at least. And many of us find it difficult even for 3 minutes in a sustained basis. But in an organizational context, when you're equally relevant to an individual, only when the expertise. So in Bhagavad Gita, it's often, one of the definition of yoga is karma kaushalam, which means excellence in what I do. So if we are an expert in what I do and in the challenge that is confronting us, then only can we be in a state of flow. Otherwise, we usually are in one of the other quadrants there. And for instance, when COVID came, and a lot of people found that they didn't have the capacity to respond to what was happening based on the sudden change, suddenly the challenge was higher than the skills they had, and the anxiety was natural. And some others went into, okay, can do, maybe this is a chance to leapfrog and get digital and do many other things like the Zoom platform we are on. And so this again is an important thing to consider when we look at what does it truly mean to be in wellness. It's been decades ago, I think in sometime in the 80s, when Peter Drucker had said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Nothing could be truer than that. Many of the organizations I've worked with, where we've measured the culture and then we have held the space for transformation of culture, it repeatedly comes up. People are so used to thinking that if they define the key result areas and if they give directions, this is how things to be done. No matter if you are the topmost person, you have been a founder, it just doesn't work that way. I remember about 10 years ago, I was working with Yahoo, a senior leadership team. And at that time, Yahoo was like, we can be great again. When I visited their office, I found that there was so much fear around. And as I just sat there for a couple of years speaking one-to-one to senior leadership, and I'd done a culture measurement too, I realized that while they were laying off 25% of their workforce every quarter based on performance, they were telling them, please collaborate. Doesn't quite work that way. And then a month later in Bangalore, when I did the, with the top leaders, which are all senior directors and above, it was evident that the data is telling me that there is an issue here. And on the face of it, people are saying we'll be great again. And when I asked the top leader, it surfaced that they were going to close down that division in 6 months. But nobody was able to say that. And being able to hold in a compassionate vulnerable way. And then as a leader, even in a situation where, let's say your division is to be closed down in 6 months, how can you deal with that situation? That's true leadership. And that otherwise people fall prey to so much stress and so much of gossip that it really hurts. And so if you truly have to bring wellness, it's not about just getting a yoga teacher to come over and do something in a week. It's much deeper than that. And so that brings us to what truly is the transformation which will take us to corporate wellness. So I find this a very powerful way to look at it. And a couple of takeaways from this you can have is, only when a leadership team and the organization in the transformation and adapt state, where they're not running around like a headless chicken trying to either just get things in control, or they're not running it as a directive that, hey, just do this. So very frequently when I work with leadership teams, I first ask the CEOs and top leadership team, are you willing to engage in this? Please don't tell me that go fix my team. It doesn't work that way. Are you truly willing to be the servant leader who is holding the space with me for the transformation to happen? And so this kind of gives you a view of what is transformation which will lead to corporate wellness. And now I'll come to, all right, if this is it, how do I go about it? Now, in the last 25 years, in the leadership space, coaching, of course, has emerged as one of the key areas. And interestingly, last year, after 25 years, the International Coaching Federation overhauled the whole paradigm of coaching to emphasize far more on self-mastery than they did in the past, to emphasize far more on the systemic transformation than they did in the past. Now, the word coaching is often misunderstood, especially, for instance, in cricket. We think if someone tells us how to bat and gives us feedback, that is coaching. Coaching is not about feedback in leadership context. Coaching is about being a true mirror, to be able to hold a very sacred, confidential, safe space. And in a journey of about 9 months or so, for instance, when I do coaching, I may do just 1 hour every 2 to 4 weeks. And that individual can be anywhere in the world. And they themselves bring what they want to actually discuss in a particular session. They are the ones in driver's seat. I'm just helping them become aware and helping them define the actions which they define that they will do between 2 sessions. And the experience is, when they connect the dots at the end of 9 months, some of the limiting patterns that they have held have begun to transform, which otherwise they might have held sometimes for decades. And that's why 99% of the CEOs have coaches, not because they're not already high-performing individuals, but because if we are human, all of us have to be able to see clearly. And the first job of the leader is to define reality clearly. So the other lens I use, and I am certified in the biography work with Karl-Heinz from Germany. And here, being able to see the different stages of life. And, for instance, between 21 and 42 years, we encounter a number of things, life experiences, which shape how we can develop our faculties. And 42 is a very interesting point. For instance, when I see Krishna and Rashmi taking the Vedic wellness forward, it's about this curve of A. How do I now bring the gifts to the world in a way that's larger than me? Some people keep trying to do what they were doing earlier. That's where, many of them tend to, in the late 40s, early 50s, encounter heart attack, cancer, and many other things, because they think that, let me just keep doing what I was doing, and it doesn't work. Sportsmen usually tend to retire around 40 for the same reason. And as the decline in the body sets in, some people also start declining with it. That's a C curve, which is to be avoided. And again, there's a whole science behind it, where we look at what happens in this. And I have actually done analysis of, for instance, Abdul Kalam's life for the whole 84 years, and some very interesting things surfaced. Values is the other thing. So when Richard Barrett defined this, what he did is he, more than 20 years ago, he took the Maslow's triangle in psychology and took the upper part, self-actualization, and used the Vedic wisdom to blow it up. And then, mapped it to the various chakras. And interestingly, till last year, they were not openly acknowledging it's a chakra mapping. And I often would ask people in Value Center, the CEO or Richard, hey, you say it is chakra mapping, it's not acknowledged. And when they did the website update, they even did the color updates. That's very interesting. And again, the values can be measured. Values are the energetic drivers of our behaviors. And unless you measure them, how are you truly living them? They tend to become fluff. Many organizations have very similar sounding values: integrity, respect for individual. And you talk to the people, you realize that it's not being lived. So if you measure what's an individual value, what an organizational value, you see the dysfunction that is there. That's when you can begin to transform it. Again, some of the paradoxes. So Barry Johnson, over 40 years, has done an immense amount of work. And he beautifully says we have to move away from the tyranny of the or to the power of the and. And to give you a very simple example, people tend to focus on either task or relationship, but these are not either or. If you cannot hold both, if you neglect one at the cost of the other, over time, you will get the worst of the both. And this is something that applies not only in individuals' life or in organizations' life. This is large geographical, geopolitical. You can actually see some of these things, and you need not know these terms. A 2-year-old also faces the same thing. When you ask your little child, hey, share your toy, he's already facing a polarity, because if he doesn't share, he doesn't make friends, but he doesn't want to share because he wants to own it. Again, we need to be able to measure who we are. So, we often say, know thyself. Now, how do we do it? One of the most powerful ways, and this is evolved by Ashok Malhotra over the last 50 years in a very, very powerful way, of the different universes that operate in us human beings and how they play. And then in an organization also, how the different tendencies are there. And most organizations tend to be in what is called the clockwork space. I give you an assignment, do it. I'm expecting you to submit it. Also, many of them operate in a context of these are roles and these are boundaries. But different people have different propensities. And this, of course, today is not the time to go in it. I can make a 2-day workshop and still not do justice to it. But I just want to give you a pointer to how one can powerfully measure and experientially see what's playing out in the individuals in the leadership team. And one very interesting thing that happened with me, one of my classmates from IIT, whom I have known for 35 plus years, and I have had so many long conversations, when we did his measurement, and he leads a large software company, a French software company subsidiary in India. And there were certain things that surfaced simply because we were able to now see based on data and together look at data and see what's happening. So the power of data combined with the perspective of looking at patterns is very, very powerful if we truly have to get to wellness. How do we use the Indic framework? What I found is the power of the myth. And of course, John Campbell in the Western context described the whole hero's journey. And many in the, there was a whole research around 1970s where the hero's journey, how that happens and how different obstacles are faced and how the hero brings back the elixir. And a lot of movies like Star Wars, etc. were made. Mahabharata, to me, is actually the 5th Veda, because after the 4 Vedas were written, Vyasa was told, hey, why don't you write Mahabharata so that it can become something that weaves it in simple stories so that people can live it in their lives. It's not about the characters there. It's about all the Kurukshetra being fought within us, all the aspects which are archetypes, archetypical energy being us. And so the power of the myth is, if I say a single word, hey, Bhima, the image comes up of someone who is passionate, who is ready to flow into action. But there can be always a shadow side that, he might do certain things very impulsively, and he might still work within the system, not go out of it. So I have found some of the work that I've done with Raghu Anantnarayanan and some of the books he has written on it, and this is the latest book that has come out in 2022, very powerful, where for me, every time in the last decade, as layer by layer we have done this, we find that as we understand the space we are coming from inside, we are able to hold paradoxes. Now, if many of you would know how in Bhagavad Gita, when the war was happening, Arjun tells Krishna, please take my chariot in the middle of the two armies, and then let me see what is happening. So in a way, he was the only one who could see the paradox because he was able to see the whole. That doesn't mean others are not important. If any one of the other energies is missing, an organization cannot run. But if you need to reconfigure an organization, the only one who can do it is who can take a step back with the love of an organization, look at the whole, look at the paradoxes, start with, I don't know. I get very afraid when I hear leaders say, yeah, I know this is the way it needs to be. If you are not able to get into the I don't know space, your inner Krishna will not speak. The whole of chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita and 2.10, Krishna did not speak one word. Only when Arjun had exhausted himself and said, okay, now tell me, then Krishna starts speaking. And the Dharma Sankata in our context, Indic wisdom, is no different than the polarity thinking in the West. In fact, it is much deeper when you actually begin to explore the layers that we cover through it. And finally, one of the key practices, if you can just do one thing, which can change your life as an individual and as a leader and as an organization, it is to learn to listen. And it is not easy. So as a practice, it is very good to establish a triad where there is a speaker, there is a listener, and there is an observer. So observer is always in the witnessing mode. Without the observer, the space doesn't get established. Observer is in the inner, anchored in Shantam, equanimity. And because of the observer being anchored in Shantam, the whole space is now available for a very powerful listening space. The listener is anchored in being the Sakhi, which is in the Shingaram space, the love space. A listener is not trying to think, what do I respond? How do I give this person a solution and get him out of trouble? How this is right or wrong. In fact, the very definition of listening is not about what I understand in my head. The definition of listening is the other person feeling understood. And I find very rarely people are able to get into this space. And the speaker, who is the Karta, he can have the freedom in this space, which is held by the Sakhi, the listener, and the Sakshi, the observer, to truly express, even if they don't initially be aware of anything else. The Sakhi, the listener, will bring to their attention, what possible things, what is it evoking in them, and could offer with love possibilities which the speaker may not have seen. And ultimately, we have to build those Sakhi and Sakshi, the listener and observer, within ourselves, because none of these are ultimately outside. True transformation, inner transformation comes when we can look at the inner drama. And today I will not go into all the next level details of the inner drama, but some of the archetypical energies to the next level that are playing out. When we can look at it from a space of a meditator or a witness, from a space of a friend, from a space of a dreamer, that's when there is a higher energy that can come in and dissolve some of these patterns, many of which belong to even the precognition and pre-language time. Many of them have got into place as the prarabdha karma in the first 5 years. Many of them have been the inner child wounds we are carrying and we are not even aware of. And it doesn't, unlike psychology, which would probably go and dig those wounds and try to make sense of it, I usually call that as looking at the rear view mirror. Coaching is looking through the windshield. Yes, we need to do this, but we are not, if some of those energies are alive here and now, I'll feel it in my body. Now, it is not about just going to the memories and trying to recount the memories. It is what's happening in my body, what rasas are being evoked in my body here and now. And the listener, if the listener is truly listening, can pick that up very much and reflect that back. And truly this journey of metamorphosis, whether for an individual or a leader, is a journey of metamorphosis where you have to be patient. If you cut the pupa stage or something, you have crippled the butterfly for life, because it's only by that friction that it develops the strength in its wings to be able to fly. And with that, I open up for if there are any questions and answers. Thank you so much.